Welcome back. World leaders are gathered in Munich, Germany right now for the annual Munich Security Conference, and it's expected to focus almost exclusively on the Russia invasion of Ukraine. Last year, as this conference was going on, Russia was amassing troops on Ukraine's border. Everybody was preparing for the worst. Well, this time, we're in the middle of a war. Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed the conference this morning, and he once again called on the West to urgently deliver military support, saying that Ukrainian lives depend on it. As he has done multiple times in the past year, Zelensky evoked the biblical fight between David and Goliath, saying David defeated Goliath not by the power of conversation, but by the power of his actions. As Ukraine is preparing for Russia to launch a new offensive in the coming weeks, President Biden is going to be headed to Poland next week to mark the one-year anniversary since Russia's invasion. And according to the National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby, President Biden will deliver remarks on how the world has rallied around Ukraine and make clear the U.S. will stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. Kirby added President Biden is not scheduled to meet with Zelensky and will not be traveling to Ukraine. One would assume, though, if he was going to Kyiv, they wouldn't tell us until after he landed. My colleague Andrea Mitchell sat down with Vice President Harris for an exclusive interview early this morning and asked her about America's support for Ukraine as the war reaches the one-year mark.
This is becoming a war of attrition. Doesn't Vladimir Putin have more ammunition, more artillery to outlast Ukraine?
Well, you're right, Andrea, that Vladimir Putin decided, unprovoked, to start this war. And he has the ability to end it by stopping and getting out.
He's shown no sign of giving up or negotiating.
Well, that is part of why we will make sure that we do everything possible within our power to strengthen Ukraine's position on the battlefield, so that if and when there are negotiations, Ukraine will be in the strongest position in a negotiation.
Will the American people be willing, especially with a Republican majority now in the House, will they be willing to stand up for Ukraine and make sacrifices?
I know the American people. I know who we are. And I've seen how the American people feel about this. I've seen it traveling all over our country, to places you might not imagine, where Ukrainian flags are flying in their windows. I know the American people feel a sense of moral outrage and a sense of responsibility for our nation to stand with the Ukrainian people around these atrocities, and I'm confident in that. I'm confident in that.
All right, joining me now is the person behind the interview, our chief Washington correspondent and chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. And Andrea, humor me a minute here. I want to talk to you in three buckets, but I want to stay with Ukraine first, then we'll move to China, then we'll move to politics. Let's start with Ukraine. I heard what the vice president said. I saw what Mitch McConnell is saying today. They released the remarks before he gave them today. I'm curious, 1 year from now, at the Munich Security Conference in 2024, if we are in the same place in this war, more or less, maybe slight advantage to Ukraine, but we're in this sort of stalemate, what's the enthusiasm going to be at the Munich Security Conference for keeping this up?
I think the international community will be there because it's stronger than ever. Even with all of their privations, the inflation, the fuel costs, they've gotten through this winter, and they are really committed. NATO is committed. Whether or not it slips at home, and a recent AP poll showed that support for arming Ukraine, it's been, more than $70 billion, another big chunk, maybe $10 billion is coming next week. When the president is in Poland, he'll be announcing that, we expect. That is, hugely significant given the politics of a re-election year. Right. And so this latest AP poll showed that it's slipping by 12 points. Chuck, you know that better than anyone. Yeah. And I don't know whether a President Biden in re-elect mode is going to be able to rally the people behind a war that will be less popular.
So Ukraine has to make significant progress in the next 6 months. Is that the message that's being sent to them?
I think there has to be some kind of diplomatic endgame, and so far Vladimir Putin, with no problem of public opinion back home for sure, has shown no signs of that. What Zelensky is saying is, get me the ammunition now, get me the weapons now, because I need it by March. I need it by that Russian offensive. He needs to show some strength moving into the possibility of regaining Crimea to get some leverage against Putin. But then the question becomes, is Crimea a red line for Putin?
All right, let's move to China. What did the vice president say? I thought yesterday with the President Biden's remarks, and I was trying to read, I thought it was striking that he said, I'm going to be speaking with President Xi. That almost felt like that was his way of trying to admit we've got to turn the temperature down. But I'm curious, what did the vice president say to you about outreach to China right now?
Yeah. She was really focusing on not just defending the shoot down of the spy balloon and the fact that they, without knowing what they were, shot down 3 private, benign, commercial, perhaps academic research balloons. That said, she is signaling that they want to reestablish communications, and that may be possible this weekend. Nothing has been confirmed, but you have Wang Yi, the top diplomat here, and Secretary Blinken and Kamala Harris. The possibility of a high-level meeting between diplomats certainly could be on the table, and if that happens, that could be to set up the Xi-Biden telephone call that the president was really pointing to. They know, as they've been saying all along, that the world expects China and the United States to get along. You cannot have the 2 remaining superpowers not getting along, and how important it is. And there have been signals from China, also the U.S. sending signals that they're not all that sure that President Xi knew about the timing of the spy balloon, and that could have been the military acting without his knowledge.
Do you get a sense that Biden has to talk to Xi before Blinken's trip can be back on?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that the meeting here, if it were to take place tomorrow, diplomat to diplomat could set up the phone call.
Right.
And then they could meet at the G20. There could be other meetings, you know, at the leader level.
Right.
Or perhaps a meeting in Beijing with the Secretary of State. Exactly.
All right. Finally, tell me about 2024 politics. What did she have to say about the president's fitness and the conversation that Washington has, if you will, about nervousness about Biden's ability to have the vigor and energy to do this?
Well, I went there. I asked her about Nikki Haley, pointedly talking about a time for generational change, which is not just Trump, of course, but Joe Biden, or Biden more than or equal to Trump. And she said, she kept emphasizing, the vice president did, that Biden is vigorous, that Biden has supported the American people. And then I asked her about the polling not only slipping for or underwater for the president, but more underwater for her to be on the ticket, and the conversation that people are having behind the scenes that she shouldn't be on the ticket, that basically lack of support for her is why the president is able to have a lock on getting the nomination so far. And she said he will be the nominee. He intends to be running, and she intends to be his running mate. And, you know, didn't acknowledge that there's a lack of support for her.
The hand-wringing that's out there. Andrea Mitchell, quite the setting for a one-on-one with the vice president. Having Munich in the background there. Appreciate it. Great interview. Get some sleep.
Well, you can all nail it. You can nail it down on Sunday morning.
I'll do my best.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.